Now that you've figured out where you want to grow your flowers, it's time to prepare your space. Having good soil is key to healthy plants, so you don't want to skip this step. In this chapter, I'm going to show you how to prepare your soil, whether it's in containers, raised beds, or in the ground. Having good soil is the foundation to a healthy and productive garden, no matter what size you're growing in. Let's get started with containers. Not everyone has access to ground to grow their flowers in, and that's where containers come in. So when it comes to containers, I would say the bigger you can go, the better. Just because you're going to give your plants more room to spread out for their roots to go deeper, and you can fit more plants per container. So even though you can totally grow flowers in a pot like this, which is super cute, the problem is that you're going to have to water it really often. So during the heat of summer, you might have to water a pot like this 2 to 3 times a day. And a larger container, you'll still have to water it regularly, but not nearly as often. So I think larger containers are actually a lot easier to take care of. When it comes to growing in containers, drainage is super important. So if you're growing in a wood or a metal container, if they don't already come with holes in the bottom of them, you're going to want to pre-drill some before you fill it with soil. So you can see that we've pre-drilled a bunch in the bottom just to make sure that we have really good drainage. And if you're using some kind of ceramic or terracotta pot, you want to check and make sure there's at least one drainage hole in the bottom of each container. If they don't have a drainage hole, I would just pick another container, because then when you go to water them, they're going to fill up like a bucket and actually rot out and drown the roots of your baby plants. So when you're choosing a soil, you want to get the highest quality potting soil that you can find. And I would ask your local garden center or your nursery for what they would recommend for growing in containers. Now, the soil you're going to choose for your containers is going to be different than what you use for starting seeds. You need something that's got more nutrients and it's kind of more chunky and compost rich, because your plants are going to have to grow in that for a lot longer time. This is so good. Look at that. It's nice and chunky. It's got lots of organic matter in it. Like, plants are gonna love this. Okay, so now that I've got my container filled with soil, I'm just gonna add a little bit of organic natural fertilizer. This is made out of all natural ingredients. Nothing toxic about it. It kind of stinks because it's got fish in it, but it's actually gonna make the plants super healthy and happy. So I'm just incorporating it into the top couple of inches, and I'm good. I'm just gonna give this a nice deep soaking of water, and then I'm ready to plant. If you have a bigger planting space but either don't want to grow in the ground or you can't grow in the ground, raised beds are a really great option. So depending on what you're going to be building your raised beds on top of will determine the depth. Here I'm going to be building this raised bed. I'm planting it on top of an old roadway, but the soil below is not in bad shape, it's just compacted. So this 12-inch deep box is perfect. It still allows my plants to have a nice amount of space for their roots to go down, and then they can kind of burrow into the soil beneath once they reach it. But if you were building a raised bed, say on top of an old driveway or really crummy soil that's kind of waterlogged, you'd want to go up quite a bit deeper. I would say about 2 feet. So when it comes to choosing a material to build your raised beds out of, you're going to want to avoid pressure-treated wood and railroad ties, because both have toxic chemicals in them that you just don't want to get in your plants or grow anything that you're going to eat in there. For my raised beds, I chose a naturally rot-resistant wood because it'll last longer, but you can use anything that you've got laying around or anything that you can get for free. Doesn't really matter which wood you use. Okay, so now let's fill our box full of soil. So when it comes to choosing the soil to put in your raised bed, you've got a couple of different choices. You can always use the bag potting soil that we used in the container, but it can get expensive if your raised bed gets pretty large. It'll just take a lot of bags. So if you've got a local landscape supply or nursery that you can ask about getting a 3-way mix, which is a third compost, a third topsoil, and a third sand, and it's just a really nice mix to fill your box with. So for my box, I'm going to be using some soil that we had left over from a construction project, and then I'm just going to add compost to it afterwards to make it a little bit more nutrient rich. Oh, it's heavy though. You can see there's some weeds in there, which I'm gonna pull out. But other than that, it looks pretty good. I'm just gonna flatten it out and pick out any chunks of roots or bark, that kind of thing. Get it out of the way. All right, so next up, I'm gonna put in some compost on top just as a soil amendment. Okay, so now I'm gonna add my organic fertilizer, just like I did with my planting container. A nice dusting over the top. And then I'm gonna mix all three ingredients together, the soil, the compost, and the fertilizer. But I'm just trying to mix the top couple of inches, not going super deep, because that's where most of the plant roots are gonna be. And then I'm just grabbing out any big chunks that I find that were either in the compost or that soil I put in, just so that there's no weeds or big debris in there. Okay, so now I've got that all mixed together and I'm ready to plant in my raised bed. So now I'm going to show you how to prepare in-ground beds. So if you have grass in the area you're thinking of planting your cut flowers, you're going to want to get rid of it first. And there are three main ways to do that. The first way is to use a sod lifter, which is a machine that has a blade on it and it goes underneath the grass and slices off the roots, and then they are just in these long sheets that you can roll up and take away to compost. It's really fast. You can actually prepare your space in a weekend. The only downside to using a sod lifter is that it's pretty backbreaking, but it's very instant. The second option is to use a rototiller. That's what we used behind me. A rototiller has these sharp blade-like tines that break up the grass and chop it into pieces and help it decompose more quickly. Rototillers are really common on farms or if you garden a lot in a big space. Now, if you don't have a rototiller and you want to use one, you can just rent it from your local hardware store. And the third option is called sheet mulching, which is actually the easiest because it doesn't require any special equipment. All you need is a bunch of cardboard and some compost. So let me show you how to do it. All right, so you start with cardboard and you really just simply cover over the space, the grass that you want to kill. And just make sure that you don't leave any gaps like this where grass and weeds can grow through. You want to get that covered because we're really trying to smother that grass. Okay, so now I've got the bed that I want to prepare covered, and now I'm going to lay down the compost. So the key with sheet mulching is to make sure that the compost is very thick. It's going to be thicker than you think. You're going to want to get about a good 4 inches. You could even go 6 if you want. Just you want to make sure that you're smothering the grass underneath and you've got lots of thick compost to hold that cardboard down. I don't want to spread this out over the whole length of it. I actually want to keep this thickness in place. Now, the only downside with sheet mulching is that it takes about 2 months. So you just got to give yourself a little extra time, but the investment is going to be totally worth it because it's going to be like chocolate cake when you're done. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to prepare a bed where the grass has been removed. So the first step is to put down a nice thick layer of compost, which will help the soil retain more moisture and just add nutrients. Next step is the fertilizer. So I've got this good organic fertilizer, and I'm going to do a nice dusting of it on the soil surface. This always feels like spreading like powdered sugar out on some kind of baked good. And now I'm just gonna lightly incorporate it into the soil. The last step is to just rake it smooth. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and you can see I've got a few grass chunks, just get those out. All right, and now I'm ready for planting. In this chapter, we discussed how to prepare your space and the importance of healthy soil. Good soil is key to happy plants, no matter if you're growing in a container, in a raised bed, or in the ground.